Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Between the Lines, a podcast series where the intent is to take a deep dive into the key ideas or themes or quotations as discussed in a particular book. In today's episode, I am joined by Shagun Thukral, who, being an introvert, considers books amongst her best friends. Now, as a child, she was drawn into the world of Enid Blyton of magic faraway trees, wishing chairs, fairies, and pixies. Later, she enjoyed thrillers, whodunits, and fantasy stories. In the last few years, she has enjoyed reading spirituality based books as well, although a genre of books that doesn't quite appeal to her are the self help books out there. Now, as a self professed Potterhead, she takes pride in the fact that she has even converted her daughter into one. Books are her window into a world different from hers, offering new thoughts, ideas, and perspectives. And she can't sleep unless she has read a few pages, no matter what it is. Now, in today's episode, we have picked The Last Lecture by Randy Pausch and co authored by Jeffrey Zaslow. Now, this book is a memoir on the life of Randy Pausch, or Randolph Pausch, as his mother liked to call him. And it covers the journey from the time that he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer sometime back in 2006, and how he dealt with it, and how he wanted to be there for his family and for his kids in particular, even after when he was gone. I hope you enjoy listening into the podcast. And without any further ado, let's dive straight in. Hi, ma'am. Thank you so much for joining me today for the second episode of Between the Lines. Um, Jumping straight to it. So, in the book, if you remember, the author mentions how during his childhood he has had certain dreams which are very instrumental to the way he has led his life, to the fulfilling life that he had. And later on, when he grew older, there were other people's dreams that he fulfilled, which was an even more rewarding experience. So, in your journey, in your experiences, have you had any dreams that you've dreamt like in your childhood, and you have actually pursued those and fulfilled those?
First of all, thanks for having me, and it's a pleasure. And books is something that I'm extremely fond of. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to read something quite different from what I normally read. So coming to your question, I was a very straightforward child. I mean, I think my conditioning was so aligned to what my parents expected of me that I don't think I ever thought about dreams in a way that, the author does in the book, like he has some amazing dreams. He wants to be an NFL, he wants to play in the NFL, he wants to, be part of Disney. And, it's really nice that a child can, have those kind of aspirations. I was not one of those shy children for sure. I did everything I was supposed to. I studied, I played, I did well in exams, and, I took a career that was very mainstream, succeeded, got a job. So, my life was pretty textbook till, a couple of years into a corporate career. And then I realized that none of this is making me happy. And I think that's where, for me, that journey of what I really want and what I aspire for, started. Um, I think somewhere I thought, maybe, so I think the point I'm trying to make is, for me, it's been an evolution. It's not something that I've had a goal. The goalpost has changed constantly. For me, it still continues to change. I think the only thing that I have figured out in terms of, my aspirations and where I see myself is that it has to make me happy at a soul level. It has to give me contentment at a soul level. So it really doesn't matter what I'm doing. If it gives me happiness, I'm great with it. Having said that, the second part of the question where you asked, making others' dreams come true. Um, I don't know if I've had that kind of privilege, but I think for me, from a family perspective, this is something that I, work constantly for my daughter. Um, she wants to do astrophysics. I don't know if she will, she won't. But for me, like right now, that's the aim. Uh, I would like to believe that I have had a tiny impact in my students' lives. Sometimes when people come back after 10 years, it's, oh, you learned from you. For me, that is enough. If someone remembers me after 10 years, that's enough. So I think for me, those are the kind of aspirations I have. They're very small, but I think small, but I hope they can be impactful.
And so, do you think that the dreams that you had when you had them were more rational given the experiences that you had earlier? Or were they like when we say that in my childhood I dreamt that I would do this, and at times they are a bit weird or something very unusual that we dream of? So, do you think that growing older, our dreams become more like very practical or rational, or is it still something which is maybe not that direct or straightforward?
So I think I was far more rational as a child as I am now, as compared to now. I think now I'm allowing myself to see the possibility. Like I said, growing up, it was very textbook. You have to, yeah, I don't know if you heard this growing up, but, we definitely did that. Okay, focus on your 10th standard and then you can, live life later. Okay, focus on your 12th standard, then you can live life later. So I was always like, okay, what is the next step? What is the next step? And it was only when I finished ticking all the boxes and I was like, okay, so what's next? And there was nothing. I'm like, this can't be my life, this 9 to 5, 9 to 12, whatever those hours used to be. Like this can't be my life. This is not what I work for. And I think the only dream, so to say, again, probably pushed by society was the fact that, you have to excel, you have to climb the corporate ladder. I would say stuff like, okay, by the time I'm 30, I'll be CEO somewhere. But I realize I really don't want any of those things. Uh, it was not something, I think it made me believe that if I set my mind to something, I can do it. Um, and that is, I think, something I take away even now that, if I get up one day and say, okay, I want to teach, and I go ahead and teach and, that works out. And no, I want to, start something of my own, so I go ahead and I do that. I think it's given me that confidence that if I decide to do something, it's possible.
Mhm.
So it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter how big or small. It's just about, I've learned that about myself, that if it's something I truly want, I can do it. It doesn't matter whether I know it, I don't know it. I want to do a PhD, I'll do a PhD. That's been my journey. I don't think it's been so much as thinking far ahead and working towards something. It's been like on that particular phase in my life or that particular turning point in my life, what has made sense, even if it's come out of blue, uh, to go ahead and do it. So I think I'm far less rational today than I was as a kid. Like I said, I was very realistic about what was achievable. So I never had dreams to be an astronaut. I never had dreams to be, a police officer. I never had any of those kind of aspirations. It was like be a CA. Which 13-year-old wants to be a CA? And I'm like, how stupid for you. Should have thought of something more, more fun in life. But yeah. So I'm making up for lost time now.
I can totally relate with the textbookish type of life that you're talking about, because maybe somewhere in my journey also it has always been that अभी 10th की पढ़ाई कर लो, you score good, 12th का admission हो जाएगा, then 12th की पढ़ाई कर लो, and then you score good, you get admission in a good university, and then you'll get some time to live life. And then now I am like, okay, I have, where do I live life? Like, what do I live life?
Right.
Those questions come up. Okay, so you talked about also enabling the dreams of your students, and in the book also the author says that how at times he had taken some stance for his students, which was maybe not the popular opinion, or not really. It was not he could not convince that to others that okay, this is something very appropriate or the best step to take, but still he had put in his best efforts. So, in your journey as a professor or as a mentor, have you ever taken that strong stance for any student and later on it has paid off? So, like when you felt that this student deserved a chance or a second chance, and later it was like that student proved himself or herself.
Uh, I can't think of a specific incident, but I think one of the things that I felt very strongly about really was, you know, when I started working in the education field, I had done my CFA and I had taken a lot away from it. Um, I think kind of bringing that into, the institute where I was, trying to work with everybody to align the syllabus with, something that was globally accepted, um, allowing our students to get scholarships. I won't say that, I had to put up a very strong fight, but yes, it came out of, the regular things to do. There was no other institute in India at that point that had done this. So I think for me, that was quite, I won't use the word accomplishment, but, it was something that, I felt very strongly about, and I, pushed it till we were actually able to achieve it. The other thing was, trying and realigning things to a more real world, uh, not just an academic approach to how things are typically done in educational institutes, making it as, what's happening in the industry, what are people really pursuing, doing, is something that I have genuinely tried to do. Um, like I said, I don't think it's been something that is rocket science or it's been something that I had to rebel and fight for. But I do believe that it was something that was not happening at that time. Uh, and I felt like important to take that kind of step and do something that was out of uh, textbook, if I can say, that again. Yes, I think for me, that was probably one of the bigger things that I managed to do.
I still remember the initial 5 minutes of the lecture that you would devote to the market pulse and what's happening in the bond market. And that was something I was in awe of, that how can you stay so updated? And I mean, with all the news and the kind of where are the rates moving, you would give us a knowledge of all of that. And that was quite good.
So I'm
But
glad
now,
to hear that.
so moving on, there was a football coach that the author had who stressed a lot on getting the fundamentals right. So that was, in fact, the only thing that he made them do on the very first day or in the initial few days that they went for coaching. So, do you feel that today, with so much of information available online, with courses promising that you can master this in the next 20 days, in the next 30 days, or with our attention span growing so low, uh, has the importance of fundamentals become a niche, or it is still as important or relevant as it used to be?
I think that is something that never loses relevance. It's never ever going to lose relevance, right? Um, it's, you can't construct a building without a foundation, right? If the foundation is weak, at some point it will crumble, right? So it's so important to build that foundation and focus on fundamentals. It is becoming a challenge because I think the misconception is, that you have AI to give you all the fundamentals, right? Why do I need to spend time, energy, effort kind of learning that? I can just pull it up on ChatGPT or something like that, right? Um, so I will take it a step further. It's like, you build the fundamentals. Last part of building the fundamentals, like I think even in the book the author mentions, is the practice part of it, right? You have to devote that time to till it becomes a part of you, like it built into your subconscious that you like. It's like driving, right? Initially you have to think about where is the gear, where is the steering, where is the indicator. But today, if you've been driving for a year or so, then you're doing it very subconsciously. You don't have to put effort to it. And I think it's you have to get to that stage, right? And if you don't allow that time to and put in that kind of effort, um, anything you accomplish will be very superficial, right? Because you won't understand what the base is. Won't understand where it's coming from. So it's unfortunate. I'm hoping this is just a phase. Yeah, that we will pass through it and people will come back, or it will evolve into something which is better. Uh, but yeah, this is a challenge. I mean, in the classroom, I already have people, when I say something, I see that they're on ChatGPT. Or it used to be Google, but, now it's far more concise, precise to what you're saying. And, they're like, okay, fine, it's all here. So what is it that you are teaching us? Uh, so I think one of the things, like you mentioned, even what we did with your class, and I continue to do that with students today also, is to be able to connect what is happening in the world with the fundamentals. So, they're able to draw the connection, they're able to connect the dots, and start seeing what that really means in the bigger picture. Uh, that's my hook to keep them engaged. But yeah, like I said, that's something that you cannot miss. If you're a finance student, if you don't know how to read a balance sheet, right? You can know how to calculate the ratios. ChatGPT will give you the ratios, or any AI tool will calculate the ratios into the field. But when that ratio moves in a particular way, how are you interpreting it? If I don't know what has gone into that formula, what drives or moves those underlying variables, how do I make sense of it? So working capital, has, I mean, sorry, I don't want to get into too many finance specific things, but let's say, particular gross margin has come down. But if I don't know what gross margin really, what goes into calculating gross margin, how do I interpret it? Right. So it's very important that you spend the time actually sitting and calculating it, or at least putting it into an Excel sheet where you can see how the numbers are moving. And you do this again and again and again and again. So the next time if it has come from year to year, you already know what those reasons could be. Right? You're not depending on an external analyst, or you're not depending on some version of AI to tell you what it thinks. And I think this is another thing that I've been trying to do. I'm not saying I've been very successful, but what I'm trying to do is to get people to question what AI flows are to. So this is AI's opinion, which is an opinion based on a sample of people who had an opinion on those. But that doesn't have to be my opinion. And my progress and my employment, or what contribution I have to an organization, depends on my opinion. Like if I'm unable to provide a unique thought process, then what is my role? Right. So I think this is where, I would hope to see, progress being made, where we don't just take what it is, but, go behind what it really means and what are the possibilities beyond that as well.
On a separate note, so like in the book also, the author mentions that although he could not make it to the NFL, but still the learnings that he got from soccer or from his coach, that stayed with him throughout his life. And those learnings, or even the memory of his coach, whenever he used to make a big decision later on in his life, he would just think back that, okay, what would coach say if I told him about this situation? And that helped him sort of get a feedback or create a feedback loop. So what would you say, like, what kind of role have sports played in your life? Because I know that you play at least tennis, from what I know. So if that has contributed in some way, yes.
Sports has been very, very integral in my life. And even today, I think sports has been my happy place, if I can say that. As a child, I spent hours on the tennis court. I couldn't wait for weekends where I would get to play 3-4 hours as opposed to just 1 hour. And looking back, that time it was just something fun to do. I mean, I was good at it, and but I also realized that it was that place where, when you are there, everything else is tuned out. You're just tuned out of school, you're tuned out of home, you're tuned out of your friends. You're just being in the moment, enjoying that experience, right? And you're only focused, for me, I was only focused on hitting the ball where I wanted it, So I think that, being in the moment, being in the present, was a lot. I also, landed up making great, I wouldn't say necessarily friendships or relationships, but it was a place where you bonded with like-minded people, so to say, right? The same objective, right? As I've grown older, I did lose, when you're in the studying corporate life, you do tend to lose touch with some of the things that you love. But I'm happy the last 10 years I found it back in my life. And it's the same today for me, right? When I'm on the court, it's the one place where I'm there just for me. It's I keep saying, for me, tennis is my therapy. If I don't do it, mental state isn't great. So, and I realize what it does is it lets you let go of a lot of, pent up negativity. Just for me, just being out in the fresh air, like I said, being in the present, being in the moment. Um, it's great for my mental state. Uh, More importantly, I think sport teaches you a lot in terms of, I'm sure so many people have said this, but it's so true. Like whether it's perseverance, whether it is, just dedication, when you can't get that one shot, you're practicing and you're practicing, and you're just pushing yourself more and more. And I think that's the other thing, right? You don't know what your limits are, what your boundaries are till you really go kind of beyond that. So that's something that, sport, it's also teaching you failure. You can't win everything. And what do you do when you lose? What is the kind of mental talk that you have when you are playing a point? Are you that person who's constantly pulling yourself down and, or you're the one who's, constantly pepping yourself up to do better the next time? And just one loss or one failure is not the end of the world. Tomorrow you come back and you play another match and you get another chance, to do it better than you did in the previous day. So I think for me, these are obviously, it's things that become embedded in you when you play sport as a kid, right? You don't realize these things at that time, but today you can see, what role that has played throughout your life. I also played hockey as a kid, which was a team sport. I played for Pune district as well. That is another whole set of other, how do you play together? There's always going to be someone, who is better than you, or not playing part of that, not blending well with the team. There'll always be conflict, so that whole sense of how do you leave all of that aside and work together as a team when you have a common objective, right? So even a team sport is another great experience that you continue to have um, in terms of learning life skills. And up late, last year or so, I started doing gym regularly. It's something my daughter and I do together. I tried gym like a million times earlier and never really committed to it. But this time it's been different. Maybe because I'm doing it with my daughter. And we are a little more serious. Like we have, a trainer, and that's the other thing. I never thought I would see myself do these things, but just, pushing ourselves. We maintain a little diary and then we see, okay, 6 months back, this is where we were and look where we are today. And I think that small incremental progress, little by little by little. And when you look back and you see, wow, as long as I keep doing it consistently, the results will come. The unfortunate thing is people want results instantly, and there's nothing that's instant, right? So for me, that's also been something new that I've, learned that if I keep trying, at some point, you will get to where you want to be. Sports is, I recommend it for everybody.
I know, because the thing you mentioned about you and your daughter doing gym together, I'm sure like having an accountability buddy sort of helps when you don't want to hit the gym, the daughter will be there that okay, we need to do it.
So somehow as a mother, you can't say that chal aaj nahi jate, right? I mean, you can't be the one that speaks that. So no matter how I'm feeling, I'm always like, it's gym day today. We have to go to the gym. So you will like, come on, we can't. I was like, no, we have to go. So that definitely helps.
Mhm. So moving on, um, in the book, there is a mention of a concept of a Dutch uncle who is basically a person who gives you honest feedback in a way that you actually end up implementing that feedback. Uh, so I'm sure we all have so many people giving us feedbacks, maybe at times warranted or unwarranted. But let's say for people whose feedback actually matters to you, what do you think is different in their way of giving the feedback that pushes you to actually incorporate it?
So I think for me, obviously, from professional space, I've had amazing mentors, and obviously at different phases, they've been different people. But I've been really blessed. Like I've had really, really great mentors who guided me into what direction to take, brought me back on course, when when they thought I was losing track. Um, I think, but my biggest critic and my biggest well-wisher has been my husband. I think some of the things that has helped me, like you said, what is it about the way they say it? I think the fact that they genuinely believe in you, and that faith that they have or they express in you, whether nicely, not nicely at times. Uh, but I think that complete, you know, trust that whatever they say is in your best interest and they want nothing more but for you to succeed. Uh, I think is what really motivates. Many times, like I think the author also mentions when someone is just praising you and, is just has no feedback for you, it really means that they've kind of given up on you. Or I would even extend it and say that they really don't think you can do anything better. That this is the best that you can offer. Right? So I think when someone and then of course there are times where things come to you where you don't trust the person's intentions. It could be coming out of jealousy. It could be coming out of their more ulterior motives. So whatever. But I think to find those people in your life who want nothing more than for you to do well uh, and achieve your potential. So sometimes that comes in the form of being put in a nice, loving, trying to convince you way. Sometimes it comes in the form of a stick. Sometimes it comes in the form of a threat, whatever it is. I think we do that with I do that with students as well all the time, right? For me, um, I want nothing more than for them to be able to achieve their full potential. And it doesn't matter what direction you go, as long as you are doing your absolute best that you can to achieve it. I think this is the same message that I give to my daughter as well. She'll come back home and she'll be like, oh, I don't think I did really well on this test. Or, I don't think she plays basketball. I don't think I played as best as I could. And it's never about how could you do this and why did you lose the marks. And I was like, did you just put in all the effort you possibly could before? Right? It doesn't matter what happens on that day. You can't control what happens on that day. But when you prep for this or when you were going into this, had you done every single thing possible? And if you had, that's all we can expect. That's all that we can always anytime do. The result we can't control. Right? So even when I'm teaching in class or when I'm prepping students, my idea is just to challenge them to see the potential. Sometimes that means failing them in an exam, just so that they know they need to work harder. And then you can see that, the next time they come in for an exam, they're a lot more prepared. So it means it's possible, it's doable. I was just being lazy. Or I thought it's too hard and I didn't even want to try. So yeah, for me, I think the person has been my husband, both on a personal and professional front. I've made so many detours on this path. I just think, it's the path I've chosen. But yeah, that every step that, this is possible or not possible, or maybe try harder. This is not a time to give up. I think with me, I do tend to, or at least I used to tend to give up very easily. If I didn't get something in the first couple of shots, I'd be like, oh, maybe this is not my cup of tea. And, maybe not want to attempt it again. I think for me, the biggest, example in this case has been I had become visiting faculty for some time. And the idea was to, do something on my own. And I really wasn't sure which direction this would take. And while I had, managed investment funds in the past when I was still with, in my corporate career, I never had the confidence to manage money myself for people. I didn't think it was a skill set I had. I thought I was maybe not equipped enough. I was not knowledgeable enough. And I had a fear that, I felt too responsible for other people's money. Like, what if they lose money on account of advice that I gave? And that it seemed like something I could never live with. And because of that fear, I never even gave it a shot. And I kind of skirted around, like, okay, I'll only advise, I won't do, I'll just make a plan and, let them figure it out on their own. And so I started out doing this, and then I realized that unless I'm actually doing it for people, how are they going to benefit? Like, I can't just give it on paper and say, okay, this is the roadmap, go ahead and do it. And my husband was like, why can't you do it? Like, what is the worst possible thing that can happen? Right? You're doing it with the best intentions. You're putting your best foot forward. As long as you are being completely true to yourself and to them, what can go wrong? And I think just taking that leap of faith, because he had so much faith, made me do something that I never ever thought I would do. Yeah, and it's opened up it's made me see a side of myself that I never knew I had. It was the same with doing a PhD. I was like, I don't think I have it in me. I had a 1-year-old baby at home when I registered for my PhD. I was like, how is this even going to happen? But my PhD supervisor, Dr. Komarvi, he was, he's like, you have a great topic. You can definitely do this. And he genuinely helped me along. Again, that's something that it's not, like I said, for me, my dreams have been always this, possibilities which I didn't even allow myself to think about. And it's only when I've gone ahead and achieved it that you're like, oh, I had this in me. So it's really, for me, it's really been, my mentors, my family that's pushed me to a point, and their faith in me, nothing else. Of course, my parents, right from the beginning. Yeah.
I guess for me, feedback, like if someone is giving me feedback, if I'm to accept it or not, comes like how much trust do I have in that person? And
Exactly.
do they give me the freedom to make my own call? Like give me the space and freedom to take that judgment. I mean to take that feedback or to not take it. And there could always be that something which I'm not comfortable with. So how comfortable are they with me not accepting the feedback? That is something that determines how open I am to receiving feedback for someone.
Yeah,
Moving.
I'm not great with normal people giving me feedback, though. I'm not.
Mhm.
I'm not. Like I said, if especially people outside my inner circle,
Mhm.
and I allow very few people to be, that close to me that they feel comfortable giving me feedback in the first place. So for me, it's normally been, like I said, like my mentors who I've worked very, very closely with, or my family, and my husband the most.
Mhm. So moving on, in the book there is this line, or there are these few lines where it said that the person who has failed often knows how to avoid future failures. The person who knows only success can be more oblivious to all the pitfalls. Uh, do you relate with it? Do you second it, or do you feel that there is something wrong with this statement? Anything? What are your thoughts?
No, absolutely nothing wrong with, what the author is saying. So nothing teaches you more than failure. Nothing teaches you more. I'm forgetting what the correct sentence is, but there is a saying to that effect. There's no better teacher than failure. In multiple ways. If you've had success very early, um, and I honestly, I was that kid. I always did whatever I did. I found success. As a result, that in later in life, when I did stumble, and like everyone does, you don't know how to pick yourself up and get going again. It took me a while to kind of learn that, and I think that's where I spoke, right? Because you're failing every day. Like I said, you're not winning matches every day, right? I had to kind of lean back into those kind of situations to really see, like, okay, this is what it feels like not to get what you want, or not to, reach the goalpost that you were trying to reach. Um, Also, it makes you kind of resilient. Um, just not giving up in what you're trying to do. Um, I'm trying to think of what has been my biggest failure. Uh, I think for me, there was never something that I failed at in the sense that, I didn't get. But I think for me, realizing that the career path I had chosen was not the right one for me, in spite of achieving everything that I had hoped for. To kind of pick myself up and find something new was hard. And like I said, tomorrow I may do something else. But today I'm not afraid. Today, like you can give me anything and you say, okay, give this a shot. And I'll be like, yeah, I think this works for me. I'll give it a shot. I'm happy to kind of start again as many times as required to move in the direction that I think my life needs to at this point in time. I think also embracing that nothing is the end of the world. I think that's for me the biggest life lesson. I think many of times we feel that just because we haven't got something, that this is the end. There's nothing beyond this, or there'll be no more hope for me. But that's not the case. You get up, you give yourself one day, suck it up, sulk as much as you want, cry as much as you want. But next day we get up and we'll try again, for sure. And doors open, paths come. And if next day again it doesn't happen, then third day we'll get up again and we'll try. Right? And there is absolutely nothing wrong in saying that A, I made a mistake, B, I failed. Because it doesn't mean anything. It's just the path. It's just the path that you take. Now I know 2 ways that something doesn't work. Right? Tomorrow maybe I'll discover the third way that it doesn't work. But fourth way maybe I will find what does work. And yeah, so for me, I think it's made me very fearless. Failing makes you really, really fearless because you're like, what more can you do? What more can go wrong? So yeah, failure, nothing teaches you more than what failure does.
I guess for me, what my failures taught me was to put in the best effort, like you said earlier. To put in the best effort that I could in the time that I have, like instead of later on regretting that, okay, I could have done it better. Instead, when I have the time, I try to do like go all in, as they say, and whatever energy or effort I can put, I try to do that. But yes, after that, it's okay. I set the benchmark both ways, or I set the expectation both ways that it can happen, it cannot happen. Both should be fine later on.
So because we have to accept, right, that everything is not in our control. You just have to surrender to the fact that who knows what tomorrow brings. It's not in our control. As long as we've done the best we could.
Mm-hmm. So, again, in the book, there is one chapter where the author suggests that we should tell the truth all the time. And then in the next chapter, he says that, okay, he has often been accused that he sees life as black and white, and he fails to recognize or to appreciate the grays in the life. So, do you think that you have always been, or like as a person, you have appreciated the grays in life from early on? Or is it later on that you learn that, okay, it's not always right or wrong? There are also the in-betweens, or in finance, as we say, it depends. So, like, what are your thoughts about it?
Yeah, I've been a pretty black and white person for very long. And it's hard for me to accept the grays, honestly. I'm like, either you are this or you're not. I'm learning. I think specifically when it comes to people, not to judge, to understand context, to understand backgrounds, also perspectives. So, I think your perspective and my perspective would be very different. And to kind of accept that as, not seeing it from a right and wrong, point of view, but more that this is, someone else's background, context, this is what their air conditioning environment has been, and that kind of shapes a thought process. I'm learning to kind of appreciate that. But yeah, like when I talk to my daughter also, I'm like, it's very black and white. I expect her also to be equally black and white and to make those choices accordingly. It's not it's not easy for me to accept the grays. I know a lot of people say, oh, it's okay to tell a lie if you're not hurting someone, but I'm like, but you are, kind of, if you're keeping the truth from them, whether they understand it or not. So I'm not one of those like protect someone by not being honest, or that's hard for me. someday. Someday. Yeah.
So there is this one incident from the book where the author mentions that how his wife kind of got the car into an accident and there were a few dents and she was worried the entire day how he would react
Yeah.
to that. And in the evening he just comes and when he gives him the news, when like the wife gives him the news, and he's just very easy or casual about it. He says that yeah, it's fine.
About it, yeah.
Yeah, but then later on, when she says that, okay, we should get the estimate for the repairs and all, and then he says that, no, it doesn't need to be repaired. We can drive it around just like that. Like, not everything needs to be fixed. That for me was something novel because usually, like, what I have seen, like, growing up, is that smallest dent or let's say the paint comes out after a point, you want to get it repaired because it reflects on your identity or maybe on your status or like it is something which you care about. But to see the author
Yeah.
being so matter of fact about that, it was something which I appreciated, and maybe I'll incorporate that, maybe not, but it was something new for me. Like, how did you find it? Do you feel that it is
Yeah.
like incorporatable at some extent?
So I could in fact relate a lot to it because I am not so particular about material things at all. So, if the car has a dent, like, like the author's wife, I would be more concerned about what my family is going to say about it. Like, more in terms of, how could you do this and why can't you be more careful?
Hmm.
I'm more scared of that response than I am of what someone else outside would think about my status or my economic or financial. Like, that makes no difference to me whatsoever. Uh, so yeah, I didn't find it too unusual. I could relate more with the wife's thought process when she was panicked the whole day about what she had done, because that sounds like something I would do. But apart from that, I appreciate the author's response with having that kind of mindset. Absolutely not everything doesn't need to be perfect, and this desire to live uh, a life that looks perfect from the outside, but the inside is problematic or an issue or a struggle, makes no sense to me. Like, I see no desire to present a picture to anybody. For that matter, I don't know so why anybody needs to care about what my outside looks like. I mean, everybody, please just worry about your own. We all have enough things to care about. So this has been something that has constantly been, if I can just extend this to broader things, that material things in general have played a very little part in my life. I mean, of course, we all like a life of comfort and that you need to be set and secure and comfortable, but that's about it. Like, I have never been driven by uh more money or a bigger house or a bigger car. Those kind of aspirations is something that has never motivated me. If someone offers me a bigger paycheck, that is never going to be a reason for me uh, to change what I'm doing. In fact, my choices have always reflected the opposite. I've always made decisions where my paychecks have only gotten lower and lower. But like, from a mental and contentment space, I'm in in a much, much happier state. So no regrets whatsoever. Yeah, so for me, like, the fact that he doesn't care that his car is dented seems very normal. If you look at my car, there are plenty of scratches. It exists. I wouldn't even notice it. Like, it wouldn't even catch my eye. It has to be pointed out to me. Like, hey, how did this happen? I'm like, I don't know. At some point, I guess. Yeah.
So moving on, there's again this one entire chapter dedicated that, like how in life, there are a lot of times where all we need to do is to ask, whether it is for help or it is for some opportunity. Uh, what in your experience it that stops us from asking? So be it for help or be it for certain chance or be it for certain opportunities.
So, I think two types of people over here. One is your ego that doesn't let you accept that you don't know it all, right? You feel like, I'll figure it out. why do I need to ask for help, or why do I need to ask someone to tell me the way? I'll figure it out by myself. And I think that's your ego talking. I think there's a second kind of person where they don't feel worthy. I think that is also an issue, that you don't think you deserve or you will get the help that you need. You don't think it's coming, forthcoming for you. So I think someone who kind of struggles with that sense of self-esteem as well feels like, maybe I'm not. So both ends of the spectrum. Someone who thinks they know too much and someone who thinks like, that this, not unlikely to get that kind of help. But, my personal experience has also shown that unless you ask, that there's a thing that, if you don't ask, even God will not give it to you. Right? You have to ask. And it doesn't make you small to ask for help. It doesn't matter who you're asking also, I remember I had a boss, very, very senior, extremely, like I had just started out. He used to struggle with the computer. Like, like he had grown up in, like, he probably worked in a complete paper environment and all of this Excel and all. He was still new to him. I'm talking about the early 2000s. But, he had achieved so much in life that he had absolutely no qualms in asking like a 22-year-old to say, listen, can you show me how this works? Can you help me with this? This is what I'm trying to do. Can you tell me how it works? And, I think that's very inspirational, because no boss is going to pretend or, be in front of a fresher acknowledging that, yeah, I don't know how to do this. So I've had like, these amazing people in life who've had no issue admitting, accepting when they were, when they needed help, the smallest of things. So I think that's how I kind of also shaped my career, that it didn't matter, who I needed to ask help from. I'm asking my daughter for help all the time with technology. We are figuring it out. So yeah, absolutely. Like I said, it doesn't hurt my ego. But I also feel most of the time it is someone thinking that, if I ask, what will they think of me? Will they think, that I'm not good enough? Or, is this going to, will I get laughed at? I mean, those are sometimes things that I have struggled with. It's not so much like I'm ashamed to ask, but it's just that you're scared of judgment from the person in front of you. "Kya re, itna bhi nahi aata kya?" So I think that fear sometimes stops you. But more or less, I think I found people to be forthcoming. I don't think it's been, a problem, or at the end of the day, it only helps you.
Mhm.
It only helps you.
Okay, so this one is the last topic or last discussion for the time being. So, there is this line again where it said that time is all you have, and you may find one day that you have less than you think. So, I guess this kind of outlines, or it summarizes the entire premise of the book, where the author is it shows the fight against the pancreatic cancer that he had, and then he has the 6 months left, and that is when he tries to understand that how can he distill the entire wisdom that he would have wanted to give his kids in the next 20 years into these 6 months. So how does he record all of that? How does he make his kids realize that, okay, I was there for you, I cared a lot for you, I fought a lot against cancer and tried to survive. So, and
Yeah.
then it comes across that how, at least for the author, I felt that he was a person who would live in the moment and who would enjoy life, who would not care a lot about, okay, what is, how does, like, how big is his house? As long as he was enjoying his life, it was enough for him. As long as his, let's say, his niece and nephew, they were having those good experiences or good memories with him, he didn't care if they were dirting his convertible for that matter. So, like, what do you think when we say that living in the moment, how easy or how difficult is that, for, let's say, for you, or for people in general?
Oh, yeah, it's definitely not easy. Um, Actually, one of the reasons I took so long to get through this book was because I would start it and put it down. Um, Largely to do with the fact that, we lost my mother-in-law to cancer last year. My dad was diagnosed with cancer last year. He went through massive surgery, and, that's what he's doing okay. We've had health issues with my daughter in the past, 4 5 years. Uh, so this is something that, has been very close to home, and it makes me emotional. And the moment I start feeling that, sense of, so the book was triggering a lot of those, realities for me. So I would keep it down and I'll read it when I'm in a better state of mind. But absolutely, not easy to live in the moment. I think, especially if it's a family member, it's someone close to you that is, or you yourself, struggling through any of this, you always worry about what the future looks like. Uh, so either your life without them or for them without you. I think uh, it's not easy. Um, what we do try and do is, like, I think what the author also says, is just make the most of the time that you have together. Because again, you can't control anything. So he at least got 6 months to, kind of have that opportunity to, put everything down. God forbid it was an accident, you didn't even get the chance to say what you wanted to, say what you needed to. So I think what we've actively started doing is, you know, uh, not live in the fear that if tomorrow something happens, then what will become of things. But if I need to say something or if I need to express something, I am doing it every opportunity that I get. Right? That doesn't take away the fears, at least not for me. As much as I try, it doesn't take away the worries. You still are concerned. But at least the time that we have, if I have an opportunity to say something, I'm going to say it. If I have wisdom to share, I'm going to say it. If I have, something that is bothering me, I'm not going to wait. I don't want to, die with those things in my mind. I would rather express whatever I needed to with whoever I needed to and be at peace. So I think that is something that we try to do. Also, you know, I think life is so short, like especially in the book, it's so obvious, like, life is so short. You don't know what is going to hit you tomorrow. That, we don't get tied down with ab exam hai or ab ye hai. And, you have to just take out the time for things that truly matter. And, not be stuck in this routine that society kind of defines for you. So whether it is, if you, spending 12 hours at work and not really having time with your family or for anything that is important to you. I think that understanding of what truly you need to prioritize is so important. So again, as a family, that is something we actively try and do, whatever it is, just prioritize what is important for us. For me, my tennis is non-negotiable. I have to play tennis irrespective. Spending time, making plans, vacation plans, whatever. If it's 2 days, it's 2 days. But, whatever it is, that to get that sense of, what is important for us, and that deserves more priority than, a work schedule. I'm not saying work is not important. Of course, it's important. But I think balance is critical.
So basically,
And I
not
think when you
being
have that understanding of this could be taken away from you.
Hmm.
Yeah, when it can be taken away from you any minute, I think that sense kind of, that those priorities have to kind of realign.
Yeah, so not taking time for granted, I were to say. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining me today. And of course, I understand that it has been like I used to keep asking, like, when can we have the session? And now I understand that. So again, thank you so much for your thought today. And yes, I hope we reconnect soon.
Thanks for thinking of me. Yes. Really, it's been a pleasure. Like I said, thanks for giving me an opportunity to read a book I would not have. It was definitely worth, seeing how someone at that stage is thinking about things, and I, really, really appreciate it. Yeah, it's been nice. Thanks for having me.
So, yeah, that's it for today's episode of Between the Lines. Hopefully, you have taken some nuggets of wisdom or food for thought if you have survived this far in the episode. And yeah, something I liked about Randy's attitude was the analytical approach that he had in situations where we would like usually expect people to be overwhelmed with emotions. And yes, he did indeed live his life to the fullest, and pursued and fulfilled his dreams, even the weirdest ones. For the ones of you who are more into listening than reading, you can perhaps look up the last lecture on YouTube and you will be in for a surprise. That's it for now. Hope to see you soon in the next episode of Between the Lines with a new book and a new reader. Until then, happy reading.